Have you checked your weather app today? Because the forecast is showing cloudy with a chance of not meatballs, but sweet, sweet bombshells of justice.
Karen's detective was able to get a hold of all the carpeting that the new owners were getting rid of that had been in the house when the Alberts owned it. Since then, she's been paying for a temperature-controlled storage unit to store this rug, this carpeting, in the hopes that she can one day swab it for DNA or for blood. I asked her what that would cost. She said that it's about $5,000 per swab, and she has no idea where on that carpet John's DNA might be. So at this point, everything is a game of calculus.
A game of calculus indeed. Hello, 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 and welcome to Alexa's Room, where we are not lawyers, we are not medical professionals, we are not law enforcement, we are just people. People who have opinions about all things going on in the true crime community, including part 2 of the Karen Read Vanity Fair spread. So, part 1 was released yesterday. Off the bat, Julie Miller did an excellent job with, from what I read in the little bits and pieces of part 2, excellent job with part 1, really gripping, really interesting, and introduced new details that we haven't heard before. It wasn't just a regurgitation of the 2020 episode or the Dateline episode that we've already heard, and not a high-level overview that gives you absolutely nothing, because she spent 72 hours with Karen Read in her house before we even get into this. I love this shot. And the trolls are like, oh, Karen Read sold her shoes because she can't afford. It's like, what is she? Is she rich or is she broke? Like, I don't understand what your take on her is, but I love it. She looks like a goddamn lioness, like fierce AF. Don't mess with me. I just love how they're portraying her in this fierce, strong, independent manner, as opposed to every other mainstream media article or clip you see of her where they always like to zoom in on the weird, like, under the chin freeze frames or the wide-eyed, bug-eyed, very overly expressive. All the angles that make any woman, no matter how beautiful you are, look like a frickin' troll. So I think we all need to be kinder in terms of looks when it comes to one another and not tear each other down. You want to disagree about my views with this case? Go ahead. You want to think that she's guilty as sin? Unless you show me evidence to prove otherwise, you're wrong, but that's fine. But why do we gotta tear down the woman's look, what she's wearing? Like, it doesn't add any substance to the conversation, and you're just jealous because girlfriend looks like a bad mamma jamma. Don't duck with Karen Read. On an August morning, Karen Read is wheeling my suitcase into her 4-bedroom Mansfield home. That's also adorable too, and I feel like that just goes to show, like, the kind of person, because as we learn, the author is pregnant. So she, or was pregnant at the time of her staying with Karen Read, a criminal defendant, right, in a unaliving case, and she's pregnant. And she's wheeling her suitcase. That's a very kind thing, in offering your home to a stranger. Everybody wants to paint her as, like, this ugly person, and, you know, not for nothing, I've never met the woman. I probably never will. I don't know. She could be the meanest person ever. She could be a total see you next Tuesday. Maybe Chip Proctor was right. I don't know. But again, just shows a little bit of a different side of her that we haven't heard any other mainstream media portray her as. But anyways, her minimalist colonial is embedded with clues to her current existence. A Ziploc go bag, which I low-key did have a go bag in high school, but not for these purposes, not because I was preparing for an arrest, sits hidden in the buffet of her blue dining room. In it, Advil, melatonin, toothbrush, toothpaste, hairbrush, drugstore lipstick, strip of paper with her lawyer's phone number on it, and a bottle of Laura Mercier foundation. left over from her previous life. A copy of David Rudolph's American Injustice, a 2021 account of horrifying prosecutorial misconduct, very on brand, rests atop a stack of finance books. A burner phone and SIM cards purchased after Reed learned authorities were tracking her this year. This is what you have to do when you're in Meatball's Palace. Having a burner phone and SIM cards seems like the appropriate step when you're in Norfolk County. I mean, God forbid if you purchase a dang rubber ducky. My goodness, you'll have Sergeant Bukwacki right at your doorstep. Is stashed inside a safe box beneath a scenic painting. In her closet, a framed Rebel Without a Cause poster stands behind the poster board exhibits from her last trial. She's been staying with family and friends, but wanted to conduct her interviews in the house. Very dramatic, and I love it. Reed told me she'd have a security person stay overnight. Said security turns out to be a volunteer, a friend of sorts, who declined to be named for the story, but who looks like John Cena and has a license to carry. Bang, bang, mother ducker. I believe he was interviewed by Nurse Kim and Dave Cullinane at some point over the last couple of months. Really, if it is the same guy, really cool guy. Really good interview. Definitely go check it out if I can find it. I'll link it in my description box. But she's got the bodyguard, right? She'll be crooning to the tunes of Whitney Houston all night long. That's Lionel Richie, but you know what I'm saying. As Reed states, strangest sleepover ever. And it is strange for a journalist to stay at a subject's house with a John Cena bodyguard. But Reed's offer was audacious. 3 days during which she would discuss any and every aspect of her life and complicated legal saga with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. There will be no lawyer present or conversation parameters, even though anything she tells me on the record could be used against her in her forthcoming trial. And this is what the big sting that was being made from the counter to her motion to stay the civil case until after the retrial is the fact that she talks to media, and they're so threatened at the fact that she's finally coming forward. She's going on record. And I mean, but it's funny because you would think that this would just add more fuel to their fire. I mean, yeah, it is on record. So this is all stuff that you could pull from if you wanted to, if you found it useful. But you know that whatever is going to come out in this article isn't going to be useful for you because this is all a big sham. The reason why they're pushing to get this done as quickly as possible is because they probably don't feel that confident in their chances at securing a conviction in criminal court. But again, that is just my opinion. There's nothing we're afraid of. Any question you have, I have answers for. And that's another thing too, is clearly Jackson and Yannetti, especially Jackson, who's a very high profile attorney and has repped Kevin Spacey, Harvey Weinstein. I don't really feel comfortable with you having somebody live, nevertheless a journalist, live with you for 3 freaking days, watching you like a hawk, can write anything, spin it up however. So, I mean, that just goes to show their level of faith and trust in their client, which is amazing to see, honestly, right? And it just goes back to the point of people who don't have anything to hide typically lay their cards on the table. People who do have something to hide typically wear it close to the vest, in my opinion. My editor and I discussed boundaries. I arrived with groceries for myself and I booked a backup hotel in case I felt uncomfortable. My family was nervous, I can imagine. Me, 6 months pregnant. Yeah, crazy. I can't even imagine. Bunking with an alleged criminal. And that was like the same reporter who interviewed, I don't know if this is actually factually true or not, but in the Anna Delvey case, the reporter who was covering her was also, I believe, pregnant. I don't think it was Vanity Fair. I think it was a different publication, but it's just It's just very ironic. It's very interesting. Journalists rarely get such unfettered access to any subject, especially not someone in the middle of such an unusual, high stakes circumstances. A defendant in a unaliving case that's become a national obsession, whose freedom hangs in the balance and whose fare hinges on reliving the worst day of her life over and over again. Her story. So this is going to give us some background, which we know. Just gonna kind of skip through the stuff that we already know. Could I have hit him? Did I hit him? This is a picture of Karen and John, potentially from Aruba. I don't know. 16 hours into the investigation, Proctor texted his boys, there's gonna be some serious charges brought on the girl. Like, you can't even, okay, on the girlfriend, like, just the girl. She's a 40-something-year-old woman. Like, there's just absolutely no respect or anything, right? So they contacted, I thought this was interesting, they contacted Proctor. Julie Miller contacts Proctor. Doesn't give any comment, but he had no problem telling Kathy Curran to F herself or to F off his property, right? Really nice. Real nice. Well, I mean, I guess this is more of a polite way than saying F you, right? Reed wouldn't find out about this text until much later, along with the public. In the immediate term, her charmed existence as an equity analyst and adjunct professor at Bentley University dissolved. So again, she loses everything. Commonwealth prosecutors claim that after a drunken argument, Reed reversed her Lexus SUV into O'Keefe, ultimately unaliving him, and then drove off. February 1st, 2022. So now we're getting into a little bit more of the timeline. She was charged with manslaughter, motor vehicle homicide, and leaving the scene of personal injury or death. She loses both of her jobs, her health insurance, which, again, as somebody who is facing very critically challenging health conditions, she struggles with MS, she has Crohn's disease, and you lose your health insurance, that's absolutely horrible. I mean, that's just so freaking sad. She loses her car, obviously, because now it's in the possession of the state police, and her life savings, right? Talk about early retirement. Now Reed is living off of what remains of her 401k. Yes, trolls, this is what she's living off of. Yes, and whatever donation she's getting is going towards her defense fund. Not long after my visit, she sold her house to subsidize her legal expenses. You hear that, trolls? That's why she sold her house, and not because she's 1 foot out the door or 1 foot out of Massachusetts, like the O'Keefe's attorney wants to claim, like, oh, she's a flight risk. If she wasn't a flight risk in the criminal trial, why would she be a flight risk for this? For this, whatever this is, this little kerfuffle. Like, this is a nothing burger. This is gonna go away, this is gonna vanish, and it's gonna be what it's gonna be, and Paul's not gonna get his new deck, right? I don't know, or his new man cave, she shed. She still owes more than $5 million in deferred fees for the highly skilled defense team she's marshaled. $5 million in deferred fees. That ain't no chump change. Reed's first trial ended. Okay, so again, more background. There's some interesting little meatballs that'll drop later, or bombshells. The DA's office, so they contacted the DA's office to answer, and they didn't respond at all. They didn't respond to the 2020. They didn't respond to the Dateline episode. Nada, zilch. We have not heard a peep since the hostage video last summer from Mr. Meatball Morrissey, unless he was speaking through his mouthpiece, Paul O'Keefe, or his other mouthpiece, who has now since retired, David Traub. So I guess he's got nobody. I mean, he's got the guy from the Sun, right? The Sun Chronicle or whatever, who just joined the team, but I guess he's not readily equipped to handle these situations, right? Reed's lawyers believe the first trial's outcome is just another twist in a strange saga that involves no fewer than 4 law enforcement bureaus: the MSP, Canton Police, the BPD, and the ATF. They allege that Reed not only didn't unalive O'Keefe, but that she is a victim too of a crooked DA, jury tampering, and corrupt law enforcement. And that, my friends, would be correct. All roads point to the meatball. Other than feeling wrongfully persecuted and prosecuted, I feel incredibly violated. I bet you do, girl. I bet you do. Police have visited her home 3 times, seized her phones twice, subpoenaed her family's financial records, which is also just disgusting too. And now they've subpoenaed Bill Reed's Verizon records from 2002. Typo, not typo, who the frick knows? But I mean, talk about a violation of privacy, not only between you, yourself, your friends, and anybody you've ever spoken to, but also now your family. So, like, your brother, your dad, your mom, like, what? What do they need their funds? Why? Because they're helping you pay for your defense to stop you from going to prison for the rest of your life? I mean, it's just like, what is that going to do? What is that possibly going to add to your case, Meatball? Her private text messages, her most intimate thoughts, have been presented to the world, dissected and debated by the public. Her personal tragedy is many people's true crime entertainment. And even though the second trial, scheduled to begin January 27th, will offer more of the same BS, humiliations and intrusions, and plunge her deeper into 7-digit debt, she is pushing forward. I will not back down, as great Tom Petty once said. As scary as a potential conviction is, I will go to jail for something I didn't do before I plea out. I will never give them that win. And we won't either, girl. We won't either. We will not quit until the fat meatball sings. I mean, it's funny too, because it's like, why would somebody purposely put themselves into millions of dollars? We're not talking about hundreds of thousands. We're talking now about millions of dollars in debt. Spending every last dollar, every last penny you've ever made in your life savings. Maybe your dream house. I don't know if she had plans on maybe John and the kids moving in. Who the frick knows? I don't know. But all the plans, every hope, every dream. Why not take a plea deal? Wouldn't that be the easy way out? Unless you're innocent. And this is a complete fabrication of Meatball's house for imaginary friends. Her pent-up feelings pour out of her with the urgency of a person facing a maximum sentence of life in prison, which is so crazy. It's like, if you're saying it's as simple as a hit and run incident, but she's probably the only person ever in the history of any hit and run case / DUI case that is facing a maximum sentence of life. And they could, if they could convict her, they would sentence her to life. I'm fairly certain Canoni would have no problem issuing that sentence. Though she occasionally wisecracks in her tour through the wreckage. I never knew an unopened shredder could make me so sad, she says, pointing out the factory sealed machine, which she'd hoped to use to destroy her reams of legal documents after an acquittal. If I can get the entire truth out this case out in the public forum, that to me is priceless, because again, for her, the truth is what matters. Figuring out, like she has said, marshaling every resource she has to not only defend herself, but to find out what happened to her boyfriend. I mean, I feel like for her, that would be the ultimate kind of closure you could get, and just peace of mind of knowing what happened. So I can rest easy at night and know I did everything I could to bring justice to him, and I can properly move on and grieve and mourn, right? And memorialize him. Hey, blast from the past, how's things? That was a Facebook message Reed had received from O'Keefe in the spring of 2020. So during the pandemic, they hadn't seen each other in 16 years. They met initially, as we know, at the surprise birthday birthday party for Kristen, O'Keefe's sister. They dated for a little bit. We know this. Karen got diagnosed with Crohn's disease, MS. O'Keefe lost his sister, adopted these two kids. Now, what was interesting, and lost his brother-in-law, of course, too, I believe just a few, months after, like not even 6 months later or something like that. Really sad, really tragic. But I think this line is interesting because we see everybody on the other side sporting the Justice for JJ shirts and buttons, and hopefully yours doesn't smell like cigarettes, but what she writes here is O'Keefe, known simply as JJ to his niece, Kaylee, and nephew, Patrick, became their guardian. So not known to family and friends, right? Because he's a grown frickin' man, and he'd probably smack you upside the head if you called him JJ. But his niece and nephew, obviously, that would be an appropriate, endearing nickname to give to your uncle, right? And I could see Peggy, and Paul, even to John Sr., referring to John in the presence of Kaylee and Patrick as JJ. But for all these other weirdos, like Tara Kerrigan, the scorned lover from 50 years ago, and all of these other supposed friends and family and trolls from the Masshole Mafia, right? I'm fairly certain John O'Keefe, and not even knowing him, but just understanding how grown men operate, probably wouldn't want anybody else calling him that. Like that, it's just cringy. And the fact that they refer to him in the civil case as JJ, it's inappropriate, it's cringe, and it's disrespectful. His name is John O'Keefe. If you want to memorialize him, then call him by his name. His grown frickin' name. It bothers me so much, and I just love, I don't know if this was done purposely, but I love that she positioned it like this. So, end of rant there. Reed thought that surviving these life-altering events helped her forge a deep bond with O'Keefe. She fell for him and the kids. I felt like this is a perfect situation, says Reed. It's a Karen-sized hole in this house that I have the energy and resources to fill. So, I mean, that implies for me, I have the energy to do it. I have the time, flexibility in my job, while they were dating, and the money, right? She was the breadwinner. There's no hiding that. She made probably way more money than Officer John O'Keefe did. The relationship progressed quickly in the confines of the pandemic. Reed, who could work remotely, rearranged her schedule to be at O'Keefe's house most days, supervising the children's Zoom schooling. and making them lunch, which I imagine was probably a huge help because who else was gonna frickin' do it? I mean, I can't imagine Peggy doing that. And maybe that was the point of contention between Peggy and Karen, is the fact that Peggy was, and I'm just speculating here, but I can, piecemeal this together based on her interactions with Karen that morning, right? They're my grandkids. You know, you're just this girl that he's dating. Like, who the heck are you? And I don't want you rubbing any influence on again, I'm just speculating here, but it would make sense in my brain, and why she wouldn't like that. While O'Keefe worked a desk job in the SO Registry Information Unit at the A1 station in downtown Baston, and there they are again. I wonder what bar this is, if this is CF McCarthy's or the Waterfall. It looks probably more like CF McCarthy's, if anybody knows, but as in any relationship, issues bubbled up. O'Keefe resented that Reed got to do the fun parts of parenting while he played disciplinarian. She says, when the kids returned from a trip, and this is interesting information, when the kids returned from a trip with their grandparents, we don't know which grandparents, but it could have been on the brother-in-law side or on the O'Keefe side. It could have been, Peggy and John Sr. Reed recalls that Kaylee and Patrick walked past O'Keefe to hug her first because, yeah, she's cool, rich stepmommy who gets them Dunkin' Donuts in the morning, right? Of course she's going to be the favorite. O'Keefe felt the kids preferred Reed because she spoiled them with go-karts, fancy haircuts, and shopping trips, and I would too. I'd be like, thanks, girl. She thought they could feel her warmth in O'Keefe's stress, and yeah, kids are very intuitive. Absolutely. He never adequately mourned his sister, according to Reed, and struggled to manage his own grief, plus his children's increasingly complicated needs, emotional and otherwise, because not only did they lose one parent in a very tragic way, but another parent. And here they are living with their uncle, who's their new dad. And Kaylee, I believe, was like 14 or something when all of this started, or a little bit younger, but then when all of this really started to unfold, and when Karen and he got together, she was a little woman. She was a teenager. And she's probably looking at Karen as like, oh, you're kind of like almost like a cool older sister, right? Or the cool aunt, who it can tell things to that, typically kids probably wouldn't feel comfortable telling their own parents. And they're looking at their Uncle Johnny, their Uncle JJ, right, as a parental figure. So not only is he having to be dad, but he's also having to deal with the hormonal changes, and also the fact that they're probably still trying to process their grief properly. And if you don't know how to handle your own grief, right, towards the loss of your sister, who was their parent, that's going to be difficult. It's going to make for a very complicated relationship. O'Keefe saw a therapist with them at one point, but when the shrink introduced board games, O'Keefe checked out. I think that's part of his stock, Reed contemplates. Now, this Irish Catholic south of Boston, rub some dirt on it, drink through your problems mindset, and we all know that. We all understand that very well if you have parents like that. My parents are the exact same way, although they're not. They're just Italian Catholics from Long Island. Just as bad in my opinion. Drinking increased for both of them on weekends, which she now regrets but rationalized at the time as them unwinding after a hard week. So it appears that, he could have had a potential drinking problem, which we kind of identified in that, or Melanie Little and the Glare did during their live stream of the readout between their text exchange and the text leading up to his unaliving, right? Or them meeting up at the waterfall. It seemed like he'd been day drinking, and she was like, well, all right. Once O'Keefe had a drink or two, that was when he was the most relaxed. He would be an easygoing, but then it was this vicious cycle that he's hungover the next day during a New Year. So this is about the frickin' Aruba trip. where Karen says she saw him kissing Marietta, whatever the heck her name is, the broad-shouldered bimbo who I guess is also another scorned lover or jilted lover of Officer John O'Keefe, who marks probably the date of the day that he planted a kiss on her drunkenly at Aruba after a day of day drinking. I mean, it's just so much mean girl energy. It's just like, get over yourself, girl. How old are you? We're not in high school. Just get over it, man. He's not into you. Like, she exchanged texts with one of O'Keefe's contacts, Brian Higgity Diggities, the ATF agent, and she had a brief thing, and I love what she says here. I knew Higgins found me attractive. It helped me emotionally validate myself, which is embarrassing to admit. And let me just say, girl, we knew that. You don't need to explain. We knew exactly what it was, and it's fine because we've all been there. We've all been there, and we all ain't proud. You're good. You don't need to explain. We knew what it was. I don't think he did, but he probably also is another one who marks the date of when you allegedly planted one on him. So he might need some explaining, but you're good. The rest of the world knows what it was. On Friday night, January 28th, 2022, Reed and O'Keefe had been drinking with O'Keefe's buddies at the Waterfall in Canton, the kind of bar where flat screen TVs are permatuned to sports and friends trade shots. I have never heard that word ever, but I feel like I'm getting smarter by the word. Canton. Canton is a quaint cop town, yes it is, 15 miles southwest of Boston, just past the skirt of suburbs that are untouchable under 7 figures, where the state's major highways intersect, making it a prime blue-collar community where homes are passed down over generations. This is how you can describe Canton. And in one sentence, are you paying attention, M.W. Phelps? Canton is a quaint cop town 15 miles southwest of Boston. Great, I already have an idea of what that looks like. Just past the skirt of suburbs that are untouchable under 7 figures. Great, so okay, so it's like middle class, okay, where the state's major highways intersect, making it a prime blue-collar community where homes are passed down over generations. I have a very clear idea of what Canton looks like without me having to go. And that's how you can do it, Phelps. That's how you can do it in one sentence or less. Take notes. It was around midnight and snow had just begun falling when Brian Albert invited everyone in the group. Yada yada. So here we go. The former Marine and 30-year BPD veteran headed the fugitive apprehension team and had appeared on the Donnie Wahlberg produced reality show Boston's Finest. And I always forget about that because everybody makes a note of like, it's interesting how the Wahlbergs haven't made any comments about this. And who's to say? I mean, being a producer could mean a lot of things. I don't know how involved in this show he was or wasn't, if he actually met anybody featured in the show. So that could mean a million things. He probably never even met Brian Albert, but yeah. It would be interesting to hear, like, hey, have you been following the case? But anyways, as one of the 7 siblings raised in town, he seemed to know or be related to everyone. His younger brother, Kevin, is a Canton cop, and another younger brother, Chris, is a select board member. That night, Reed and O'Keefe were joined by a cluster of the veteran cops' family members, his wife, Coco, his brother Chris, Chris's wife Julie, the one who slipped out bukkake at trial, Coco's sister Jennifer McCabe, and McCabe's husband Matt plus Higgity Diggity, and an unrelated couple, Karina and Nicholas Kolakithis. So all of who testified at the trial, obviously. And here it is, guys. Here's your killer Karen, right? She looks so evil and devious. My God, and John O'Keefe looks absolutely terrified to be in her presence, right? When Reed woke up the next morning, panicked that O'Keefe was not home, she met up with two of his friends. So Jennifer McCabe, who was at the Albert home. So again, a lot of stuff that we already know. One thing too, and like just like hearing the background noise in the 911 call, and not the dash cam video, but the 911 call with Kerry Roberts like yelling at Karen and telling her like shut up and get off of him and stuff like that. I just found that very, if I were Karen in that moment, right, and I find my partner who's dying in front of me and freezing to death, if you told me to shut up and get off of him, I would smack you so far into next Tuesday, you wouldn't even know what's coming. Do not tell me, and do not touch my boyfriend. Do not resuscitate him unless you are a first responder, or I physically can't do it, right? Like, it just, there's so much weird mean girl possessiveness over Officer John O'Keefe, and it's no wonder why she would snap at him and be like, hey, is there someone else? Because all of your friends are females. And also, if it was really that snowy out and all these husbands were concerned with their wives driving out in the middle of the night, the wee hours of the morning in a blizzard, why didn't they go with them? Why didn't Matt McCabe go with them? Why didn't Kurt Roberts go with Kerry Roberts? If you're that concerned with your wives going out in the snow in a blizzard, which leads me to believe that, was it really at that point? Obviously not enough for them to be overly concerned about them operating a motor vehicle after all of them had experienced a night of drinking. I know Kerry Roberts didn't go back to 34 Fairview, so, and I don't know how much she had to drink, but how much did Jen McCabe have to drink, right? See her BAC levels. I always just found that interesting, right? It's not like they have young children anyways and you need one parent home. Emergency vehicles raced onto Fairview. Moments later, the red lights beaming into the dark sky and bouncing off the snow, to which apparently didn't wake up Brian Albert. Albert nor any of his families emerged from the house, even though he's a first responder, as first responders attempted to save John O'Keefe's life. Even in her confusion, Reed clocked this. She wondered whether she had dropped her boyfriend off at the wrong house, and after a night of drinking, O'Keefe entered an aggressive stranger's home. The Alberts say, because again, she didn't know really any of these people, right? She didn't know them from Adam. She probably didn't even know. She drove past the house. She'd never been there before. She doesn't know the neighborhood, right? So I could see that being a thought, right? A passing thought of, oh crap, like did he just, and is this something that he has done before where he's like drunkenly wandered off? That would be something else I'd be curious to know. Where he would just stumble into a random person's house. I don't know. And then not know his way out, right? The Alberts say they slept through the noise. But this is interesting. So this is new. The neighbor who snapped photos opines to Vanity Fair that Albert's explanation absolutely doesn't make sense. And that just goes to show, it's like, sirens aside, bright lights, right? If you're waking up your neighbors who were snapping pictures in front of all of this commotion, you have people screaming. This woman erratically screaming for however long outside of your house, that's going to wake up something. That's at least, at the very minimum, going to wake up an animal. Certainly an aggressive dog. Which in turn, I would assume, would wake you up. Unless you swallowed like 3 bottles of Xanax or something. Seriously. So, but that's the story that they're sticking to, right? Okay, so then about the same time O'Keefe was pronounced, so EMTs collected her and delivered her to Good Samaritan for an evaluation because she was proclaiming seemingly like self-unaliving ideations, etc. About I don't want to live, etc. Delivered her around 8 a.m., and that's about the same time that Officer John O'Keefe was pronounced dead of hypothermia and blunt force trauma to the head. The patient is hysterical. She is actively grieving. She states she does not belong in care. She just wants to know what happened to her boyfriend. Jonathan Rice, who I believe also testified at the trial, noted that Reed had blood on her face and hands. Because he was dying and she was trying to revive him and resuscitate him back to frickin' life. So it would make sense that there would be blood all over her face and hands, right? The doctor also noted no psychiatric history, denied any SI, HI, AH, VH, meaning no self-unaliving or unaliving to others, ideation, and no auditory or visual hallucinations. So she's not crazy. She's just a concerned girlfriend. He also noted that Reed worried continually about her husband because they had 2 adopted kids, and she stated she cannot live without him. And I feel like that just speaks to her feelings towards John at that point. I mean, they'd been dating for over 2 years, right? Practically living together and practically raising these 2 kids together. So I could totally see her, just to make things easier to explain to somebody, a stranger, right? Of how I know this, right? He's my husband and our kids, right? Our 2 kids. So, and I'm sure Peggy loved that, right? She stated she cannot live without him. When Reed's father, Bill, arrived, a nurse briefed him. Your daughter wants to know whether or not Officer John O'Keefe is dead. We can tell her, you can tell her, or you can tell her with us present. To which Bill Reed said, I will tell her. He was led to Reed's room where he told his daughter simply he's gone. And I just can't, oh my God, I can't imagine being tasked, being the one to be the deliverer of that kind of news, especially to your daughter, right? Like, no father should ever have to freaking do that. It's so freaking sad. And I am curious. Sorry, I have an ice cube in my mouth. I am curious to know what the Reeds thought of John and their relationship together, and how much Karen has shared with them. I'm sure that's going to come out because now Bill Reed is a freaking witness on for the second trial, right? So we'll see whether or not he's actually called is a different story, but I'm sure he will be. It seems like that's the angle they're going for if they're going to pull his Verizon records. Insisted that her father take her to the O'Keefe's house to see Kaylee and Patrick. The rest of the O'Keefe family was already there, including his mother, Peggy, John Sr., and his brother, Paul. They had also come from the hospital where they identified the officer's body and saw his gruesome condition laid bare. Under the bright lights, the adults gathered around the kitchen island, and Reed asked the family what O'Keefe looked like. This is interesting. He looked like he went 5 rounds with Mike Tyson. That is what Paul O'Keefe said, according to Bill Reed and Karen Reed. I don't know if her mother was there as well. I think it was just him and her. And Peggy said, I think he looks like he got hit by a car. Way to make everything seem really freaking uncomfortable. And not for nothing, too. After, didn't Karen, too, also call the O'Keefes and said something happened to John, yada, yada. And then Peggy was like, why did you leave him? Why did you leave? Like, it's all your fault. And already starting to blame her, like, while she's in the process of watching the man that she loves being skirted away to the hospital to see if he'll actually survive or not. I mean, so again, all of the actions that Karen had taken after, I can understand why it was so abrupt. She left so abruptly, right? She felt uncomfortable. Like, I'm not wanted here. You clearly make me feel like I'm suspect number one, and I don't even know what, I'm moving like a zombie, right? I don't even know what happened. She quickly packed her medication, several belongings, then hugged and kissed Patrick and Keely for what would be the last time. And she recounted this over the during the Dateline interview as well too. A few days later, Reed was court ordered to refrain from contacting the O'Keefe family. I felt like all of a sudden this went from being my house to I am persona non grata, she told me. As they left, she told her father, Dad, I don't know what happened, but I feel like Peg thinks I did something wrong. And I want to go back really quick to, because we've been doing a lot of reading, just break this up a little bit. Paul O'Keefe's interview with Christina Rex about how he knew, right? How he knew it was Karen, which I think is interesting. And again, we haven't heard from Paul since any of these interviews.
Did.
Right. How would you have expected her to act in that situation if she hadn't done something?
More sad, empathetic, sympathetic. But like I said, when she was at the house, she barely said a word. You know, she wanted to be there for the kids. My nephew came home. My niece was already home by the time she got there and her family arrived. And I sat down, my nephew in the other room, she sat right next to him. I explained to him that JJ's, you know, something happened and he's no longer with us. She didn't say a word. And right after that, she went upstairs and started gathering her belongings. And the next thing you know, they were gone.
I mean, what do you expect her to say, Paul? Like, and I get it. He's your brother. That's horrible. I feel horrible that that's happened to you. You know, I will forever feel terrible for your family that they had to endure a loss like this. Nobody should have to go through this. No matter what kind of person you are, no one should. Period. End of story. But you're the one who's controlling this narrative of saying, okay, well, I sat down the kids and I told them, hey, JJ isn't going to be around anymore. Something happened to him. He's no longer with us. What are you expecting her to say after she was literally trying to revive him just a few hours earlier, then started proclaiming, I don't want to live, having to go to the hospital, getting checked out, going through all these things? I mean, one, she's probably exhausted AF. Two, she also suffers from a ton of different medical conditions, so I'm sure physically her body is also drained, and she's like, I gotta get my medication and go, right? So I can deal with that. But also mentally, she's trying to freaking process. And whether or not she was actually experiencing self-unaliving ideations or not is neither here nor there. I mean, she's processing what the frick she saw him. Yes, you saw his body in the hospital after the fact, but when she saw him, he was still alive. And that is an incredibly traumatic experience. And I'm not taking away from the fact that it wasn't traumatic for Paul O'Keefe and his family. Of course it was. Of course it was. But you didn't see him in the before, right? You're not his intimate partner. And I feel like things are different when you have a intimate in connection with somebody, right? And I don't know how close or not close Paul and John were. I don't, right? We can only know from Paul's perspective. They could have been the best of buddies for all I know. I don't know. Doesn't matter. But I don't think it's fair for anybody to judge on either side how anybody deals with grief, because it's different. And it was very sudden, and Karen was there. Karen was there and trying to save his life. And watched him literally get skirted away, didn't get to say goodbye to him. After going through all that turmoil with him in the previous weeks and days, and probably even months, right? Over her text messages, she had explained that. You know, it felt like he was pulling away. And now she doesn't even know where her place is in these kids' lives. And it's it's a lot to ask somebody of like, well, why aren't you crying? Why aren't you more sad? And it's a very dim comment to make in my opinion. And I understand he's frustrated, he's angry, but I mean, I don't know. That's just my opinion. When they got home, Bill Reed searched criminal defense attorneys in Boston. Davy Gannetti's name and picture popped up. Gannetti spent the first decade of his career as a prosecutor. As a Middlesex assistant DA, sorry, I'm trying to get comfy. As the Middlesex assistant DA, he put 2 men behind bars for one of the county's most heinous crimes, the 97R and unaliving of 10-year-old Jeffrey Curley, whose attackers lured him with the promise of a new bicycle. Bill's vetting was more on instinct, a devout Catholic who prays every day and paid his way through college by working as a night guard in Fall River. Bill decided on Yannetti because he looked like an honest man. And it's like rereading this again. This is like my 3rd time reading the part 1 is everybody again likes to paint Karen Reed as she's this super privileged girl who, came from money, this, that, and the third. And from my impression, it seems like they were very much a working class and had to work to make what they have earned, right? They had to work for the lifestyle that they have and they enjoy. And same thing for her. And it just goes to show their values and what's really important to them. So I like that little ad there. But so her and Yannetti sync up 12 so they seize Reed's car and phone less than 12 hours after O'Keefe was declared, and then 4+ hours after Proctor's busy, as Mark Pedro says, humping the taillight in the Sallyport. He's hitting up his buddies all the way through, right? She was still confused why O'Keefe's body was on Albert's lawn and was shocked he was dead. I'd been with him all week. We had been intimate the night before, and now he's gone. I just, again, I can't imagine the kind of shock and horror that she was experiencing. Racked by grief and disbelief, she zombie walked through her morning ritual because Yannetti said, you better be ready for an arrest because they probably are. If this is what it seems like it is, a hit and run, then yeah, just get ready and we'll do what we can. We'll try and play you out, right? Showered, did her makeup, blew out her hair, picked out a sweater that would be comfortable in jail. Waited for hours on the overstuffed white couch in her living room where I sat while she recounted this story. 3 days after O'Keefe's death, she was taken into police custody. So 3 days. I don't think she sat on the couch for 3 days, but 3 days she waited. Oh my God, the anticipation, right? It's like, just cuff me and like book me and let's get this over with so I can come back home and relax a little bit. An attractive, highly educated finance professional accused of unaliving her cop boyfriend and leaving his body on another cop's lawn was catnip to Boston media. Morning after her arrest, cameras rolled up as she was escorted in handcuffs to her arraignment, where she pled not guilty to all charges and was released on $50,000 bail, which probably seems like nothing compared to how much she owes in deferred legal fees now. I thought this was funny. So she has a cousin, I guess, who, I don't know what cousin, who they are, but some kind of cousin with a record called her up and was like, I've been through this before, and I've pled to charges where I wasn't even in the state where the crime happened. I wanted to get out of jail, couldn't post bail, but I didn't have David Gannetti. And the cousin warned her that prosecutors don't always care if they have the right guy as long as they have someone behind bars. And we definitely can attest to that with some of the cases that we've covered here on this channel, right? Sometimes it's not about the who or the why or the what. It's just about getting another notch on your belt. That's a closed file for them, he said, then added, question everything. Yannetti received a different kind of call on February 2nd. So this is interesting. Okay, so after the first arraignment, right, she gets bailed out, right? The first arrest. She gets bailed out. She's back home. How many days later? Like 1 day later, something like that. I just want to go back. So 12 hours, 3 days later. So yeah, literally after she posts bail. Within hours of her arraignment, a man with a gravelly voice, claiming to have a background in Boston law enforcement, now we know as Steve Scanlon, who Karen Reed has since called a coward during Turtle Boy's live stream last night. If you weren't in the chat then, she entered the chat in the most literal sense. Made an explosive claim. He told Yannetti that Brian Albert and his nephew had beaten up O'Keefe on January 29th. When O'Keefe didn't come to, said this mysterious man, Steve Scanlon, Albert and an unnamed federal agent put O'Keefe's body on the front lawn. When Yannetti called him back for a more thorough interview, he backtracked, saying he was only speculating based on photos of O'Keefe in the news, and ultimately recanted the tip altogether. Hence why she and many others have called him a coward, because he has recanted and won't come forward. But who knows? Who's to say he won't again, right? Maybe things will look a little bit sweeter for Steve Scanlon, right? If he has the feds, if the feds have his back. But Yannetti points out that photos of O'Keefe hadn't been released at the time of the first call, and other details from the tip lined up. Higgity diggities! The ATF agent had been drinking at the Albert home that morning, as had Albert's nephew, Colin Albert, Mr. Bang Bang. Until the tipster's call, Reed and Yannetti hadn't known that Colin was at the house, as he later testified he was, because his name was not in police reports. And that's the biggest stink that that we all have, is why was Colin's name missing from the police reports? Nobody would have known. Nobody put any two and two thought together about Colin until this tip came in, because he wasn't mentioned in any report. And even when you hear this testimony, sorry, I got a notification. This testimony from Coco Albert about Colin. She gets really flustered, and it's interesting, and it's funny because Eliza Little is so even keeled and a very calm speaker and questioner, and I can understand getting flustered by, even Yannetti got spicy sometimes, but Alan Jackson is like a pit bull, like I always say, and I feel like she's the last person I would feel especially flustered with, unless I was trying to hide something. So I want to play this clip really quickly when she brings up Colin.
Night of his birthday.
Well, yeah, he was home with his friends.
Did you tell that to Trooper Proctor?
I assume I did.
So if it wasn't in his report, that would have been his mistake?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Did you tell Trooper Proctor your daughter, Caitlin Albert, returned home with you after the waterfall?
I believe so.
Did you tell Trooper Proctor that your son had 2 female friends at your house when you arrived?
I believe so.
And notably, did you tell Trooper Proctor that Colin Albert was present at your house?
I probably didn't, because anytime I was questioned about who was there, to me it was who was there afterwards, hanging out from the 12:15 point on. I didn't consider Colin as being there because I literally crossed paths with him. He left, and I didn't consider him being a part of the group that was there.
Were you asked who was at the house that night?
I assume he asked that, but I also didn't mention the people that my son had previous, because I didn't consider them as part of the people that I was with when I got home.
You never mentioned Colin Albert to Trooper Proctor, correct?
Correct.
And you never mentioned Colin Albert to Sergeant Lang.
Correct.
Ms. Albert, you knew that if you gave Trooper Proctor the name of your nephew, that he would have to interview him, correct?
Objection.
All right, I'm going to sustain that objection.
But it's like, objection for what, cojones? And what, like, there's no rhyme or reason. It's the same questions. It's just worded differently. And you see the eye roll, and it's just like she's so over talking about Colin because she doesn't have her hubby. She doesn't have Bri at her side, feeding into her ear what exactly to say. And I feel like if anybody's gonna crack eventually, it's gonna be Coco, because I'm sure she's had it. She's had it up to here.
You didn't want your kids or your nephew to have to tell the police what they saw, what they heard, and what they did that night.
Objection.
I'm going to allow that. Is that true?
That is not true.
But you never told Trooper Proctor about Colin Albert.
I didn't mention Colin because I didn't consider him as part of the group that we were hanging out with after the waterfall, because he left as soon as I walked in.
So then it's like, then why just, and you guys can check out her whole testimony. It kind of goes a little bit more on with that if you haven't seen it already. But it's like, then why not just say, you're recounting the night, and they're like, hey, like, who was there in the house? And you can say, oh yeah, like, and I forgot, like, Colin stopped by for like 5 seconds, but he wasn't like, he didn't really hang out, but he was there. It's just such a casual, like, not a big deal thing if that is true, but to purposely be like, well, I didn't consider him to be part of the group. It's like, you're just telling them, like, as much information as possible. Who was there? Who could have seen something? Even if Colin wasn't in the house, which we know he is, could he have seen something? Could he have passed by the alleged dead body that was on the front lawn of your house that nobody else seemed to have seen, right? And did he hear a car crash, right? Did he see Karen Reed speeding off into the abyss or into the blizzard? Like, it's little things like that where it didn't have to be a big deal if what you were saying was true. And because what you're saying is blatantly false, it looks sus, because it is sus. So, yeah, this is Steve Scanlon. And actually, before I dive into this, because I don't know, I know a lot of you guys also follow Turtle Boy and some of that coverage, but I want to make sure I'm covering all bases, because I know not everybody is up to speed with everything. There's some new people who are chiming in, learning about the case. So I want to educate and fill in the gaps as much as possible. So who is Steve Scanlon? Well, he is the tipster, or the whistleblower, who tipped off Davy Gannetti on that February 2nd date. But who is he to Brian Albert? Well, Steve Scanlon met Brian Albert when they were working as corrections officers back 30-something years ago. They were also both on the BPD boxing team. So that's him and Brian Albee. Him and Bri again. Which is interesting, because if you remember Paul O'Keefe's comment about he looks like he went 5 rounds with Mike Tyson, not saying that Brian Albert's as good a boxer as Mike Tyson, but I mean, if you're a little bit, under the influence, and you're play fight, whatever the case is, right? You're getting into a fight with somebody who has an upper hand and is also a trained fighter. And it's so interesting, the resemblances between this case and the Enrique Delgado Garcia case, who was unalive during a, quote, boxing exercise, a training exercise is how they want to call it and frame it. But it looked like he was likely also undergone 5 rounds with Mike Tyson. So Scanlon works as a PI, and he also offered Karen Reed PI help, free PI help. And when she didn't answer after he heard about the case, he reached out to Yannetti. And the question is like, and unfortunately I can't show the images below because I think YouTube will probably strike me for showing them, but I'll link the article so you can read it in full. This was published a year ago, around a little over a month and like a year ago, so 13 months or so. The big question is how would have Scanlon known that John was beaten inside the house if he wasn't there? He told me that if somebody backs up into a guy, they're going to have bodily injury and bruising, which we heard from the ME and we heard from the defense's experts as well too, right? The autopsy photos had not been released by February 3rd, and he blew the whistle on the 2nd, hours after Karen Reed's arraignment. But he told me he knew what John's body looked like from hearing news and reports about swollen eyes. Looked like a fight. Scanlon told me that he had told Yannetti that he heard that Brian Albert's nephew was involved in the beating and that an ATF agent was also there. He didn't know the names of either of them at the time, but they fit the profile of Colin Albert and Brian Higgity Diggity. This was likely the first time Yannetti had heard that Colin Albert was inside the house, which was a huge clue since Colin had previous disputes with his former neighbor, John O'Keefe. So this is what, again, as reported in Bad and Day Fair, I'll link that article for you so you can go check it out and support Turtle Boy if you desire. But that's how all of this came to be. This is context for the rubber ducks. This is context for everything about Colin. This is where that came from. In February, a funeral was held for O'Keefe in Braintree. Dozens of Boston police officers saluted O'Keefe's casket as it was carried into St. Francis of Assisi Church. Bagpipes skirled a solemn hymn as a giant American flag waved in the wind. Reed was not there because she had the stay away order, but views the pomp as performative. This whole Irish cop departed bagpipe thing, says Reed, trailing off. There's nothing holy about this. I think it is the biggest farce, maybe only second to my trial, that the people who were there in the cold outside the church were nowhere to be found in terms of actually delivering justice to John O'Keefe. And that's very freaking true. Where were the Alberts, right? Where were any of them? Any of the cops? At the courthouse, at the trial. I mean, the Alberts obviously were there, but Brian Albert wasn't even at this funeral. So, and it does feel very performative, a lot like the funeral that was held for Enrique Delgado Garcia and the whole MSP recruits, academies, all the MSP troopers, right? It's all a show. It's all a show. A breakup when kids are involved is a high-stakes decision. In January 2022, despite their troubles, neither O'Keefe nor Reed were willing to give up on the family dynamic they had forged with Kaylee and Patrick. That fateful night, they still loved each other. They cuddled at the waterfall, as security footage shows, and witnesses describe them as affectionate. Albert invited the group back to his house to celebrate his son's 23rd birthday. Beyond a bar run in the week before O'Keefe died, he never really socialized with Albert. Even though they were both BPD, living in Canton, and had McCabe in common. Albert had an alluring reputation, which is, again, some have speculated, Karen, I believe, included, saying that John, looked up to him, or just, I guess, in a way of idolizing him because he was the cop. He was Boston's finest, right? He was responsible for all of these big arrests, including unmasking the Boston Strangler in 2013 and the Craigslist Killer, which is a very, what was his name? Philip, I looked it up yesterday. Philip Markoff. Yeah, Philip Markoff. Oh, I guess he died? That's so interesting. Did he unalive? Oh, he might have unalived himself. I remember going through that case, and it's so fascinating because with this case and learning so much about the Massachusetts State Police, the DA, Norfolk County DA's office, I'm very curious into looking at more of the cases that they've investigated prior to this case and seeing how those investigations were conducted. The night he died, O'Keefe was eager to join up for a nightcap. When he and Reed arrived at 34 Fairview, though, she wondered whether they were at the right address. That's where that whole 3-point turn thing came into play, right? There weren't many cars in the driveway, and Reed felt uneasy. McCabe had conveyed the invitation, so Reed wasn't sure how welcome the couple actually were. O'Keefe said he'd check out the scene and report back, but minutes passed without a word. I got pissed, she says. She knew that a woman O'Keefe used to hook up with lived a few houses down the street, and again, when your man's is pulling away from you emotionally, right? And he's seemingly has a drinking problem. Again, it just from piecemealing information together, right? From the evidence we've seen. And a lot of his friends appear to be females. I could see why Karen would get pissed. And she had also noted, like, hey, I don't feel good. I gotta go to the bathroom. Like, I gotta do my thing. Like, what the crap? What the heck, dude? Like, can I come in? Should I not come in? I don't really like these people, but I love you. I care about you. So if you want to go in here, we can hang for a few. But, I mean, it's... And this is all, this is obviously from her perspective, but it seems logical. Like, you're drinking a little bit, you're a little extra riled up, you're thinking back on the entire day's events, your conversations over text. You didn't really get to probably talk to him about it. We don't know what words were exchanged on the car ride over. I would be curious to know if they talked about anything, if he slept. I mean, who knows? How drunk was he? I mean, we know from a BAC level, but I mean, to her, like, how drunk did he appear? And, did they get into a fight? That was a whole other thing. Did they get into a fight in the car and stuff like that? And I don't necessarily think so, but she's probably still fuming from the day's previous conversations, right? That they never got closure on. She never, they never talked out in person, right? He's got to be screwing around, she thought. I didn't think he was physically incapacitated. Okay. So after 10 minutes of waiting, Reed drove to O'Keefe's house to be with Kaylee, who was home alone. And again, this is so funny because Peggy was like, how could you leave him alone? It's like he's a grown man, a 40-something-year-old grown man who, for all she knows, he's going inside, getting drunk with this guy who he's trying to impress, Ryan Albert, who I don't really know. I don't really care about. Who knows how she felt towards Jen McCabe, if she liked Jen McCabe. All these people that she's like, okay, whatever, not really my cup of tea. Probably not on her intellectual level because she's a smarty pants, so I get that, right? When you're hanging out with people who aren't on your same level, it's a little difficult to socialize, right? And it's like, she's like, I don't want to hang out with these cops. We just hung out for hours and higgity-diggity's there. Like, this is just weird and awkward. And I gotta go to the bathroom. And Kaylee's home alone and we should get home, right? We're parents after all, right? So I feel like that's very normal. And for her, it felt like Aruba all over again. So recent, she sent O'Keefe a barrage of angry voicemails and texts, which we have heard. 4 months after Reed was first charged, Massachusetts State Police were back at Reed's house to arrest her again, but this time with a whole new charge of second-degree unaliving. It sounds way less dramatic when you say the substituted word for the M word, unaliving, right? It just doesn't hit as hard. She and Yannetti were stunned. She didn't know a rearrest was possible, and I don't think anybody did, right? Right? You already got me, right? I already spent a night in jail. Like, okay, I know I gotta figure out a defense around this, but second degree, like, what? Defendants can be upcharged when significant new evidence, keyword significant, new evidence is discovered, but Reed and Yannetti considered the additional evidence cited to be a stretch. In an interview, Patrick had claimed O'Keefe and Reed argued a decent amount of time, as do most healthy couples do. And Kaylee recalled O'Keefe telling Reed their relationship was over, with Reed refusing to leave the house. And it's like, not for nothing, you're taking this from the perspective of children. Children who don't understand the inner workings of an adult relationship. And not to say that what they had stated to the police wasn't true. I mean, we know from evidence that Karen Reed and John fought, right? They did fight, but was it an unusual amount of fight? What level of fighting was it? Was it physical ever? Doesn't really seem so. There's no evidence pointing to, because, I mean, not for nothing, if Karen was physically ABUSIVE towards Officer John O'Keefe, you would think that they might be a little bit afraid of her, right? I mean, that, again, I'm just speculating here, but I just, wouldn't they have said, like, oh, she hits my uncle? Like, I don't know. She screams at him. She does this. She's terrible. Like, we're afraid of her. But none of that. So this is their overwhelming amount of evidence to upcharge her, right? And they also cited that she was drinking. Oh, she had alcohol in her system. Now, granted, should she have been driving? I mean, I don't know. Look, we all make poor decisions. This is clearly the biggest lesson that she's ever learned when it comes to drinking and driving. I'm fairly certain she will never do it again, no matter how much amount of alcohol she has consumed. But I mean, like, everybody was drinking. Higgity diggity apparently left because the alcohol that he was drinking wasn't the alcohol that he wanted to drink wasn't available at the home that he was going to, right? And again, not for nothing, brother Kevin likes to drink, right, while on duty. He likes to stop off at Treehouse Brewing Company to pick up a couple of 4-packs of IPAs with Chip Proctor, right? Both of them. So, I mean, who are they frickin' to talk about BAC levels? And that's all gonna come out. That's all going to come out in the second trial, even more so, because, I mean, we already heard about Kevin Albee in trial 1, but I wonder if he'll be called as a witness this time around, right? I mean, I don't even know if he needs to, but just further fuel to the fire. The second arrest was Yannetti and Reed's first clue that something was, as they say, amiss. It was so dirty and underhanded that they would go behind my back, Yannetti tells me by phone. The DA requested Reed's bail be set at $500,000 hairs. That's a lot of doll hairs. I believe it was to scare me and get some kind of plea deal going. Yeah, of course. Again, look the other way. Look the other way. And we're going to hear about something that Chief Burkadirk says in a little bit about something very similar to the same kind of tune. Reed says of the second arrest, do 2 years on a lesser manslaughter charge and you'll be free, which we were never going to consider because she is factually innocent, and that's what people who are factually innocent typically respond with. At Reed's second arraignment, Yannetti argued that his client had no reason to flee. Her Crohn's and multiple sclerosis treatments were in Boston. Cajones set Reed's bail at a comparatively low $100,000, and that was probably like the biggest amount of mercy that she's shown, because if she was a real big, like, BITCH, she would have revoked bail. And I mean, it's like, really? You're gonna lock up the woman who has Crohn's disease? Okay, yeah, good for you. Great. You're really doing it, man. I have to say, I love this image. It's very like Patti Smith meets like Stevie Nicks-esque vibes. Awesome. Great photograph. Oh, and I love that the photographer is also a female. Like, love it. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. The day after I'm upcharged, David's like, and I love this little thing. Listen, I know this is the worst time to have this conversation, but, my fees double for unaliving, says Reed. Right? Oh, yeah, of course they do, right? Double the pleasure, double the fun, right? Double mint gum. The fees weren't as frightening as the legal shock and horror, though. At that point, says Reed, David and I realized this is ducking dirty. This is not, you said something, you better put your rubber ducks in a goddamn bath. Said something with that mouth. Said something that was taken the wrong way at the scene, and they got the wrong guy. This is intentional. They are framing me. By September 2022, so nearly nearly 10 months later, right? Like a whole pregnancy term. Reed and Yannetti were running into repeated roadblocks trying to get basic evidence from the Commonwealth. They hoped to get Google geofence data, which would identify every cell phone on the Alberts property on January 29th. And there was like that whole thing about, oh, it's a dead zone where we live, because they have like an excuse for every single thing, right? See, Karen Reed has answers for everything, but she has receipts for everything. That's the problem with the McCabe's and the Alberts and every person that supports them for whatever God knows reason. They never have receipts, right? They never have receipts. They have excuses and they have offhanded explanations, but they never come with receipts of like, this is why. Like, actually, I was over here. Or actually, I was nowhere near the scene of the crime. In fact, I was with this person and my alibi checks out, and you can check out the security cam footage because guess what? We're not trying to hide ring camera footage from across the street. But again, what say you? Desperate for guidance, she emails AJJ, an LA-based lawyer who used cell phone data to get a 2019 roping case against Kevin Spacey dropped. He also worked on the other side too, which the other side loves to forget, but he was responsible for putting away Phil Spector, which was a very notorious case back in the day, for the 2003 unaliving of Lana Clarkson. Since then, he's built a reputation as one of California's top and most expensive trial lawyers, which I'm sure, because he makes more money than cojones, and that's why she doesn't like him. That's really what it is. It's like you're queen poop of Norfolk County, but he's wiping diamonds, right? His butt with diamonds. Like, he's doing fine, right? Without your side commentary. Go crab walk somewhere else. Trial lawyers representing a Venice Beach hotel owner charged with unaliving, an NBA player facing DA charges, and a 22-year-old Bakersfield man who stabbed his brother in self-defense. He managed to avoid jail time for all of them. And that's the guy you want. You want Yannetti for that honest, like, trustworthy, but then you want Jackson for that pitbull energy. Jackson gets more than 100 representation requests monthly, but the subject line of Reed's email stood out. Unaliving of a Boston court. He clicked on it, read her plea. I am fighting for my life against a blue wall, and therefore marshaling whatever resources, advice I can find. On a call with Reed, Jackson agreed to share his cell phone data-related motions and asked to hear more about her case. After learning that she was being accused of fatally hitting O'Keefe with her SUV, the lawyer asked to see photos of O'Keefe's injuries. Reed immediately sent over a few, revealing O'Keefe's bruised and swollen eyes and the cuts above his right eye and nose. But it was O'Keefe's right arm, which looked like it had been clawed, not via a white claw, but by a furry thing, a vicious furry thing, that caused Jackson to exclaim, "That's an animal attack!" Jackson later said by phone, if there's any medical examiner or DA or lead investigator out there claiming that's from a car, that's bull donkey. And if that's not true, what else isn't true? That's my Alan Jackson impression. I know he sounds nothing like that, but let's move on, okay? Okay, thank you. The police theory of what happened that night is evident in the charges, but Reed and her defense team believed happened involves a fatal fusion of alcohol, testosterone, and bad luck. They alleged that O'Keefe encountered some combination of Brian Higgity Diggity, and Colin Albert in the basement, and a fight turned dangerously violent. According to O'Keefe's Apple Health data, after 12:20 a.m., about the time when Reed dropped the police officer off, he took 80 steps. Again, this is the equivalent of half of a football field. I don't care if you're not a football fan or not. That's some serious yardage. And went up or down 3 floors. Witnesses inside the Albert home that night deny O'Keefe ever went inside. The defense's theory holds that O'Keefe's body was moved to the yard. Right? And if you saw Sean on the Gulf's, Sean McDonough's Going Through the Motions live stream today, definitely check it out. He goes through some of the text exchange is between, I believe, Natalie and Turtle Boy, which Turtle Boy has also gone over extensively as well too, but it does cover this particular portion of it, because beforehand, I kept thinking, honestly, I was like, I don't know if I necessarily buy that they brought him out and they put him on the front lawn as a ploy. I always went back and forth with that. I always thought, I know it happened in the house. Obviously, I think Colin may have delivered the final blow, the boss blow. But then I was kind of under the impression of, well, maybe John stumbled outside himself, right? Or they threw him out. I don't know, right? I don't know. And he unconsciously fell, hit his head in the back of, I don't know, a step or something to that effect, right? On the concrete. Somebody saw him when they were leaving the house and they were like, oh crap. And then they concocted this whole plan. I don't know. But after hearing the live stream today and hearing those text exchanges, between him and, I believe it was him and Natalie the German, but I know a lot of you guys were already on that live stream too, so. But it gives a little bit more clarity into this idea of where he was moved to the yard. I feel like without that context, that's why a lot of people are still a lot of fence sitters, right? They're like, well, I don't understand how that would be possible, right? So Reed's defense offers several possible catalysts for a disagreement, such as Higgins' flirtation with Reed. Higgins, who testified he did not encounter O'Keefe after the bar did not respond to Vanity Fair. Another is O'Keefe's allegedly antagonistic relationship with Colin Albert, who lived 2 doors down from John O'Keefe. So again, it doesn't matter what the motive was. It just matters, can you put him inside the house in that basement, right? And with that information about the carpet, if it ever does, what if anything, it ever gets tested and there is something that comes out of it? I mean, even if you get just a little bit of his DNA, John O'Keefe's DNA, it's done. It's period, end of story. It is done. Done. According to Reed, the teenager regularly dumped beer bottles and cans on the lawn. Colin testified there was no animosity with O'Keefe and that he left the Albert home around midnight before O'Keefe was dropped off. He did not respond to Vanity Fair's questions. What, like a trash bag human? Like, if that, so he, like, on his lawn or on Officer John O'Keefe's lawn, because Officer John O'Keefe is like, I don't know. I know there was, like, rumors that, like, he was selling, there were D&E Pizza is like a front for like drug opera. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't have sources. I'm not a reporter. I'm just somebody who reads articles and shares them and talks about them with you. That's what I do. I don't have sources. But I have heard that floated around And never, regardless of that, it's like there could have been animosity about everything. It's like Officer John O'Keefe is a cop. He's got 2 kids living with him. And it's disgusting. It's like no matter whose lawn it is, like pick up your damn garbage. But nobody hits Colin with a frickin' fine or felony littering charges for leaving beer bottles and cans and glass, things that could probably, like, that actually are destroying the environment. But if it's a rubber duck with Colin's name on it, my goodness, lock them up and throw away the quacking key. Or there's the idea that Brian Albert might have simply been irritated by the likes of O'Keefe, who was given special accommodations by the BPD after his sister's death, like a desk job with flexible hours. I could see how someone could look at John and say, well, I'm a real cop. I'm the head of the fugitive unit. I've been on the drug unit, the gang unit. I'm Boston's finest. Reed imagines to me. And I could see that too. I mean, Big Brian being, the bloated tick that he is. Like, I mean, the possibilities are endless, and there may not even have been an interesting why. It could have just been something as simple as maybe he had heard about Officer John O'Keefe before in his circle of, minions, meathead minions, and it could have been enough for Brian Higgity Diggity to have been like, oh, I'm macking on his girl, and he's not treating her right, yada yada. I don't know. And them boys look out for each other, and it could have been something as simple as they made a comment about Karen, right? It didn't, maybe it wasn't even personal leading up to them. It could have been. I mean, we have seen this, and Microdots has done a great job of highlighting this and freeze framing that video from, what is it, Waterfall, when they're leaving and Higgins is like giving him the old come here, right, gesture out the door to John O'Keefe. So I don't know, it could be anything. It doesn't really matter in the long run, the why. I'm sure that, to people like Karen, obviously she would want to know why did this happen, but it's more about the who and the what and the where, right? Well, we know the what, but the where and the who. Albert and the when. Albert's spokesperson, because they have a PR crisis person now too, guys. Greg Henning denies the idea that there was ever beef or any physical altercation. He adds that Albert attended a fundraiser in support of Kristen. So yeah, I mean, roll out the frickin' bagpipes, man. Yeah, he attended a fundraiser. My goodness, wow. He and John, they went back. They go back, man. Best of friends. He also noted that Albert attended O'Keefe's wake to grieve with the family, which I don't think is true at all. I've never once seen this reported. We know he went to a funeral in New York for a totally different dead co-op. So that doesn't feel right to me. It stinks, Greg. It stinks. In any of these scenarios, the defense believes the Albert's German Shepherd, Chloe, was a factor. So this is interesting. This is new. This is something new that we haven't heard yet, right? She was being kept in the basement part of that night because she was not great with strangers, which we've heard. Albert admitted to court. She was not great with other dogs either, which we have also heard. A Canton resident told Vanity Fair that in 2018, she was walking her golden doodle past the Albert yard when Chloe attacked her dog so aggressively that she was not able to stop the German Shepherd until someone emerged. I could just imagine big old, like, bribing, like, the frickin' monster, egg-headed monster that he is. He looks like a frickin' Frankendoofus. From the Albert home and called Chloe's name. I mean, right there. And there's more that's recounted from this event. So Chloe was by herself, like not on a leash or anything, just roaming in the front yard. Did she get out of the backyard gate, right? Why was nobody with her and watching her? Why was she left to her own devices? Especially if you know she's an aggressive dog, right? And she has a history of this. But somebody from the Albert residence, or it could have been Coco, right, with her Marlboro Reds, right, smoking there with Lally on the porch step. Chloe, come here. Chloe, get back in here. The owner took her dog. The owner took her dog covered in blood to the veterinarian. That's so sad. I hope her dog is okay. I hope, like, oh my God, that's so upsetting. Who told her that Chloe needed to be reported to animal control. Naturally, it's like, this is like a brutal attack. Based on the severity and location of the bite, the vet said it looked as though Chloe wanted to kill the dog, which is interesting because it's like, was she trained? Did Bri train her to kill? And if so, there's some explaining that needs to be done about John O'Keefe's arm scratches, because they're scratches, they're abrasions. They're dog scratches, dog bites. That's what they are. Let's call it for what it is. Let's stop pussyfooting around this and trying to say, oh, it's taillight slashes. Like, are you? No. Are you drunk? No. Get out of here with that. But when the woman called Canton police, she was told the animal control. This is so bizarre to me, right? So this is what we don't know. The woman called Canton police. Mistake number 1. She was told that animal control was out and that police could not tell her when the animal control officer would be back. Like, does that happen? I've never called animal control, but would the appropriate response be, yeah, please leave your name and number and date and time you called so we can call you back when this mysterious animal control person, because I guess there's only one person, is back in town. Like, it's so weird and mysterious, and I just feel like, wouldn't they just tell you, hey, we've alerted them, we've contacted them, we don't know when they'll be able to get out to you, but they're gonna be dispatched, and just leave us, the address and whatever details you can, and we'll make sure that somebody's sent out. Like, I feel like that would be a normal response, but I mean, I don't know, right? You guys let me know. After she left her information at the Canton police, she says that Kevin Alberts, Bri's brother, in a Canton co-op, contacted the woman's husband with a message from the then police chief, Ken Burkadirk, who recently retired, or recently retired shortly after all of this. How can we make this thing go away? Neither Kevin nor Canton police responded to Vanity Fair's questions. This is freaking huge. This is huge. And this needs to be homed in so much more in round 2. These neighbors who are not afraid to speak up, right? They're talking to Vanity Fair. They're opening themselves up to being subpoenaed in court. Like, honestly, I mean, and why wouldn't they? Like, this is, especially if, like, their dog, like, almost unalived your dog, like, that's terrible. That's so traumatizing. I want justice for the freaking golden doodle. Justice for the golden doodle. And not for nothing, I'm not gonna go ahead and blame Chloe. It's not her fault. She's got poop bag parents. And if the owners don't know how to raise the dog, I don't know where Chloe came from initially, but I mean, if she was raised and trained to unalive and hurt, and do more than just guard, right? But attack purposely, what does that say about their owner? What does that say about her owner? The woman became so nervous walking past the house after word that she started to carry pepper spray. About 3 months after O'Keefe's death, Chloe attacked another dog and bit a woman who tried to intervene. That woman confirmed to Vanity Fair. So not only did she attack another dog, but she bit a woman who tried to intervene, which I believe we did here in the trial. But another woman was injured while trying to help, and the Alberts, after that, rehomed her after owning her for 7 years. And I guess she's in the puppy farm somewhere in the sky, right? That was not the only major change for the Albert family. In 2023, Brian Albert retired from law enforcement due to a shoulder injury incurred on the job, which again, one can only speculate what that shoulder injury is from, says Henning, right? Their spokesperson, right? They need spokespeople. And his maximum pension had been reached. Same year, the Alberts also sold the home on Fairview that had been in their family for decades. Henning denies that either decision was related to the case. Okay, yeah, just pure coincidence. He says the family considered selling in 2021, which could be true, but this could have been the straw that broke the camel's back, right? And they're like, well, I got the F out of here. Before O'Keefe's death, but eventually did so because the Albert children had all grown up and moved out. When the new owners moved in, flooring had been removed from the basement where Reed's defense team claims the fatal altercation with O'Keefe took place. And who was this removed from? Wasn't this removed from Jill Daniels' boyfriend? Right? Wasn't he in charge of that, or he did something with the pool, something to that effect? I know he did some work for this, like in this transition, right? But Henning said that was a modification that a real estate agent suggested. That real estate agent being who? Like one of Kerry Roberts's in-laws or something, right? Suggested following 2021 water damage, among other updates. Right? It's just all these updates that we had to make to the house. Meanwhile, you didn't, I guess, the real estate agent that is so good at their job didn't recommend them, I don't know, like putting down some new grass, putting nice shrubbery in, maybe changing the siding on the house, maybe ripping up all the carpet in the house, maybe, I don't know, like doing a full-on renovation. Like, it's just funny to make the house value actually go up. Up and up and up. I believe whatever happened to John was a setup to teach him a lesson or tune him up, and it got out of control. I agree. I mean, who knows? It could have been hazing, right? You want to be a real cop? You want to be a real Boston guy, right? A real tough guy? I don't know. It could have been that. No one would choose to unalive someone in their own home and then set it up so sloppily. Reed tells me, but this is where her willingness to make sense of everything ends. I hold the district attorney who passed the bar and went to law school to a higher standard. As you should. As you should. But we're in Meatball's Playhouse now. You know? Put him in the oven, you leave him in too long, he's gonna overbake. Scary. He can bring all the resources of the state to try and get a pound of flesh, which I believe is what he's doing. It's exactly what he's doing. It's exactly what he's doing because it's not his money he's spending, it's taxpayer money. And they're the other victims in all of this, the taxpayers. Because when she is acquitted and she sues them for everything that they frickin' have, that's still getting paid out from the town and the taxpayers. They're gonna be the ones on the poop end of the stick. That's why this federal investigation and all of this stuff with Meatball is extremely important because there needs to be justice. You know, it's like if you're not bleeding her dry, you're bleeding your taxpayers dry. Reed spent her first few months after O'Keefe's death mourning him, reminiscing, and trying to distract herself from her predicament. She wallpapered the house cooked with her mother in red. Alexandra Dumas's classic, The Count of Monte Cristo, which is in which the protagonist is framed and arrested, but ultimately escapes and avenges himself, has been an inspiration. Reed was still so confounded by O'Keefe's death that she was open to the idea that she could have accidentally hit him. I told my parents if I did anything in any way, I will pay my dues. Girl, you are paying your dues. That's how this should work. I want to know the truth, good, bad, and ugly. So she hired a private investigator and even sought out materials that could prove that she was guilty. Security camera footage from the Albert home, but Albert said he never installed a camera his wife had given to him. Nor was there security camera footage from homes on the street. Which is not true because Aiden Carney did his homework. He did the dang thing. And that is not true. Because one of other Canton's finest across the street, across the way, has a Ring camera. And perfect eye shot of the Albert home. And perfect eye shot. And you would think, and this drives me nuts, guys, if she did, in fact, hit him. And she hit him. As Jen McCabe likes to say, and Adam Lally, because he doesn't know how many times she actually didn't say it. Wouldn't they use the ever-living crap out of that video camera? Like, that would have been a done deal. If she knew they had that, and she saw the video, and it existed, she would have already been in jail. This whole trial, this whole sham, this would not be a thing. We would not be talking about this case right now. It would have been another hit and run accident. It would have been tragic. It would have been sad, but it would have been the case. It would have been. You think that one of their cop bunnies isn't gonna prove up and be excited at the fact of being like, yeah, let's lock this whack job, see you next Tuesday, as Proctor likes to call her. Let's lock her the F up. Let's duck and go. I got the receipts. I got everything you need right here. Look, she's doing her little 3-point. Oh no, she's reversing 24 miles in reverse and hitting him. There, done. End of story. There's not even like anybody down the street, right? Of just seeing her like skirting away. There's nothing. And if it was true, if this is what happened, there would be receipts. And they would use the ever-living crap out of them receipts. They would. But it disappears, right? They have excuses. Oh, I never installed the camera, right? Why wouldn't you? You have a guard dog, right? Clearly, you have a dog that's ready to rip anything and anyone to shreds at any given moment. So you seem like somebody who's trying to protect what you have. So why wouldn't you have? You feel like the exact kind of guy who would have cameras all over your house, right? Probably even inside some of your kids' rooms. Like, honestly, right? It's the vibe I get. The homeowner across the street from the Alberts who worked for Canton Police told Reed's private investigator that his camera didn't pick up anything from 34 Fairview, which is bull. This is absolute BS garbage. Security cam footage from the library that Reed drove by between 12:37 and 12:39 should have known whether her taillight was smashed. But that precise 2-minute time frame of the video was missing when the Commonwealth turned it over to Reed's team. Because even the library is part of the conspiracy, right? It's the library's fault now. The dirty librarians. The Commonwealth says they turned over the entirety of the video that Canton PD gave to them. Like, what we have, guys? I don't know. It was on my smoke break. Reed told me about a rumor that there were texts between her and her lawyer in which she implicates herself, texts that police supposedly read when they confiscated her phone, but that will never be released because they're privileged. Yeah, because that's the way that they dance around the bull crap story that they presented here. Proctor, the state trooper himself, referenced an exchange on the stand saying that he stopped looking through her phone, looking through the glass, when he saw messages between Reed and her attorney. But Reed and Yannetti each point out that they didn't communicate until after MSP had seized her phone and car. I didn't even have a cell number for David until hours after Proctor left with my phone. I never texted him on January 29th. Proctor testifying on the witness stand that he says he saw a text between David and me is a provable lie. And that's exactly true, too, because it's like, she didn't even... January 29th? What? Like, her dad was just looking up David Yannetti. Like, he was looking up lawyers for her. Like, she didn't even... Why would she have a cell phone number for this guy? She didn't even meet him at that point, right? Reed had poured over tens of thousands of pages of legal filings and police reports. She has played the waterfall security footage on repeat. She scanned every text, screenshot, Google search on O'Keefe's phone for buried clues. Initially, it was difficult to look at O'Keefe's autopsy photos and torture to imagine. What did he feel? Did he know he was freezing? Was he waiting for me to come back? And like that, every time I read that, that just like absolutely breaks my heart. It's just so... I cannot imagine. I can't, and I hope I never have to go through something like that. Gosh. She has scoured social media, going down rabbit holes on Facebook posts featuring Proctor with various Albert family members, even a post where Chip Proctor's mom called Chrissy and Colin Albert her second family. Yeah, Colin Albert was the ring bearer. And that was a whole issue of debate, right, at the trial? Whether or not Colin could admit, like, yeah, we were close. We were close, but we're not as close anymore, right? We're not that close. I've only been over their home like several times in my lifespan. Like, it's just so dim. When the trial began in April, meanwhile, Adam Lally, a prosecutor who has worked for the Norfolk County DA's office since 2010, assured the court that Proctor had no conflicts. These are not people that know each other. Anyone? Bueller? Prosecution produced 68 witnesses, at least 9 of whom were related to Albert by blood or by marriage, or by blood oath. Reed had 6, including a snowplow driver employed by Canton. Lally did not respond to Vanity Fair's questions, and I wonder why. I'm curious to see if Lally is going to speak out ever. Because for me, if you want to salvage any little like bit, scintilla of dignity that you may have as a man... then you would talk. I would talk to the press. I would tell them everything, right? Do you really want to die on this hill and go down with meatball? Do you? Do you want to eat meatballs for the rest of your life? And I like meatballs, but I don't want to eat them morning, noon, and night. Especially when they're overcooked, overbaked, and they have like one eyebrow's cocked up in an interesting way. And it smells of corruption. I don't know. You would think he would be first in line to blab too. I mean, but he's also pinned to this retrial. So I don't know. I don't know. Unless Meatball's got something on Lally. On Lally Gaga. I don't know. Leading up to the trial, Reed's team struggled to get basic discovery items like crime scene photos. Even that was a fight, says Elizabeth Little, another California lawyer on Reed's team. We did numerous discovery requests, filed a motion to compel. We were given JPEG copies of photographs of zero metadata that were blurry and useless. After 7 months of litigation, it comes out that they don't have the original photos. They came from a phone, a screenshot of a screenshot, right? And a forwarded text. Like, this is not normal, people. I don't even need to be in law enforcement. I don't need to be an attorney. I don't need to be I don't need to be nothing. And neither do you, to see that this is crazy. With all of today's software and technology, you can't get me an original copy? You have the phones. You have them. You have the phones. You have the extraction report. That's a Brady violation. That is why Mr. Meatball has entered the Brady list chat. That is why. That is why. That is why. That is why. That's why. That is why Carrie Morrissey from the Alec Baldwin case humiliated herself in front of millions of people on television. And for whatever, God knows, whatever strategic decision she made in that moment, unhinged as it was, allowed herself to get cross-examined by Alex Spiro, who desecrated her in front of millions of people. And Judge Summer dismissed the entire case right there on the spot because of the same exact BS that you are pulling right here, Mr. Meatball. It is quite the Brady Bunch. That's what the Commonwealth is, the Brady Bunch. The phone doesn't exist anymore. Initially, you think it's just incompetence. The more we dug, the more we realized that the stuff we were looking for was never gathered in the first place or was being intentionally withheld, and giving so much time to Brian Albert and Brian Higgity Diggity to do whatever they wanted with their cellular devices, right? But Brian Albert only wanted an upgrade. He was due for an upgrade on his phone. That's why he destroyed his phone or whatever he did with that. It became hard to believe it was all an accident or a mistake. I just can't stand how dumb this kid looked. Proctor seemed problematically conflicted from the outset. The investigator appeared in social media photos with various Alberts and McCabe's dating back to 2012. Though Proctor seized Reed's car and phone the day of O'Keefe's death, he did not interview Colin for another year and 6 months. And he was not in the police reports. And as we saw earlier from Coco, his Auntie Coco, she didn't consider him being part of the group, right? He wasn't a witness. Okay, well, if we're playing that game again, if Colin is not a witness, then why is he so afraid of the rubber duckies? How is it witness intimidation? If he wasn't a witness, if he wasn't there, right? If he wasn't even in the house, how can he be a witness? Make it make sense. Make it make sense. Then the interview went unrecorded, as one does, right? As all of these seemingly 10-minute interviews go. Proctor's sister, Courtney, who has like a very weird close relationship with Chip. Like, it's just a little too close to comfort, in my opinion. Such good friends with Albert's sister-in-law, Julie, that they shared 67 phone calls in 7 months after Reed's first arrest. At trial, Julie Bukwacki said she couldn't remember how many calls. Which, I mean, that is fair. I mean, if you talk to somebody a lot, like, I wouldn't be like, yeah, I've talked to them 67 times over the last, But that's a lot of phone calls, girlfriend. Ain't no denying that. But you guys aren't close. You're just, close, right? Just kind of loosely close acquaintances, but not that close, but close-ish, close. On the day of Reed's first arrest, Courtney texted Proctor that an Albert family member said when this is all over, she wants to get you a thank you gift. Which is such a weird thing to say, because it's like, if they have nothing to do with any of this and they're just witnesses in a case, why would they want to get a thank you gift to somebody, to the lead investigator, right? Like, right? Usually a thank you gift or a gesture of gratitude is preceded by an act of them doing something extraordinary for that person, right? Oh, you took care of this problem for me, and I couldn't be more grateful. Why is this a problem for you, Julie? Why is this a problem for everybody? All the Alberts, all the McCabes. Why would Proctor need a thank you gift? Why would his wife, Lizzie, need a thank you gift? Forget about all the allegations of the victim being unalived inside the house, says Doug Lewison, a Boston defense attorney who has represented law enforcement for 4 decades, but who is not working on the Reed case. He, like many legal analysts, believes Reed should never have been tried for M2. And neither did the jury. As soon as these people who Proctor was acquainted with were identified as witnesses, he should have dropped out of the case. Exactly. It was a system of failure by the state police. A system failure, excuse me, by the state police. Instead, and same thing with Cajones. There are a lot of loose connections between you and some of the witnesses in the case that you're presiding over. And even if they're true, they're not true, the best thing you can do to avoid any of this is recuse yourself. It's not that hard. You had the power, girlfriend. You were in charge of rotating all your little judges in Norfolk County. You had the power and you chose. You chose. Why? Why? Instead, Proctor declared Reed guilty via text the day he started his investigation. Now, this is the same state police that can't figure out who unalived Trooper Enrique Delgado Garcia, though, right? It's the same, or sorry, they're not investigating the case. David Meyer is, right? But still, nevertheless, like, this is the same institution that should be able to quickly identify. But no, Proctor's on the case. He knows. Karen Reed did it. I got it, guys. I cracked the case in record time. About 6 months later, while the probe was underway, Proctor and Albert's brother, Kevin, the Canton co-op, who went out drinking. The next day, Proctor texted Kevin that he left his badge in Proctor's cruiser. Kevin responded, "Did I take my firearm?" Which we went over in an updated video about his little slap on the wrist. And he's been since reinstated, Kevin. Oh, Kevin. Because apparently drinking while you're on duty, investigating a cold case, and again, how are you working a cold case with the lead investigator of a case that is tied to your brother? A criminal investigation that happened on the front lawn of your brother's house. How? And how is nobody making a big deal out of this? How? I just don't understand. I don't understand. No, I don't understand. On the morning of January 29th, when McCabe's 911 call about O'Keefe being found, there's a man passed out in the snow on Albert's lawn came in. It was Kevin's Canton Police Department co-workers who responded. One called 2 off-duty, and we're almost done, guys, officers to report to the scene, including Sergeant Michael Lanka, who has known the Albert brothers sounds like a gang. It really does sound like a gang. Since childhood. In 2002, while Lanka was off duty and drinking, he ran into Chrissy Albert, who told him that he had been harassed by a pair of brothers. Yes, a lot of brothers. Lank got into a fisticuffs, summoned police backup, punched one alleged assailant in the face, and was accused of spitting in the face of another while he was handcuffed, because that's what happens. You can get drunk, you can get into fights, and do the most Boston cop thing ever, right? The biggest cliche, and get away with it, and get a slap on the wrist, and still get to, drink on duty and do what you do best, right? Is just waste space and tax dollar money and tax dollars, right? Lanka settled a federal case, but testified that he would have come to similar defense for a civilian. Yeah, okay. What about Karen Reed? She's a freaking civilian. Why didn't you go into Brian Albert's house, you douche canoe? Before police stepped into the Albert home the morning of O'Keefe's death, they sent McCabe inside to wake up its residents. They then interviewed McCabe and the Alberts together for a whopping 10 minutes. Yes, because the people whose home it was, / people who attended the party that this guy got unalived at. Yeah, 10 minutes. It's like they're treating this like and I said this on Twitter too, in my very limited usage of Twitter. But it's like they're treating it like a group of teenagers, right? Like it was a high school party that got out of hand and somebody drank too much or OD'd, and somebody's dad is like a cop or something, and all the kids, like, it just goes away, right? This is exactly what this smells like, and I'm so certain that they have been getting away with this garbage for years. For years, when they were kids, when they were teenagers, when they did the whole kit and caboodle. Like, this is not like just new behavior. This is learned and ingrained in you since you are a child, right? 10 minutes. What can you possibly accomplish in a 10-minute meeting and together without recording it? Without recording the conversation. Anything that you think would be remotely helpful. Or searching that. It's not like he died like up and down the road or like at his house, right? In a totally different location. That was the last place he was seen. Even then you would expect a slightly more thorough interview, right? But no, of course not. If your last name is McCabe or Albert, then you are protected by the Ducky Master. Without recording the conversation or searching the house. Canton Police Lieutenant Paul Gallagher, who was sitting on a fat $300K plus salary for at least the highest paid employee in Canton. In Canton, not the Canton Police Department, but in Canton in 2023, testified that they only interviewed McCabe and did not separate her from the Alberts when doing so. The officers said they had no reason to believe O'Keefe had ever been inside. Well, how the frick would you know if you didn't even go inside, secure the crime scene, and swap anything, I don't know, for DNA? I don't know, right? I don't know. McCabe did not respond to Vanity Fair's questions. Commonwealth's key physical evidence against Reed has been her right taillight. No piece of Reed's car was found during a daylight search on January 29th after snow had been cleared from the yard with an ingenious leaf blower, right? I still can't believe that will live forever rent-free in my head from the Canton Police Audit Committee meeting, that first one. Some people could see it as being ingenious, right? I can't believe it. Reed, her family, and a Dighton police officer who witnessed Proctor seizing the car hours later that Reed's taillight was only cracked at that point. Damage, Reed says, was inflicted when she backed out of O'Keefe's garage to search for him and bumped into his SUV, which was caught on O'Keefe's security camera. And again, I know not everybody is a Sean McDonough fan. I don't know. Like, I'm not going to say this is fact. I'm not going to say this is true because I don't know. Again, I don't have sources. I'm just somebody who sees things on the internet and wants to talk about them and know what you guys think of it. If you think it's anything. But, you know, I see Sean just as credible as Turtle Boy. I do. I like them both. I have no qualms. So you're entitled to your own opinions. But this is a screen grab from his live stream earlier from a video of John O'Keefe's car, this being John Sr., seemingly standing near the taillight that, or the part of his car that Karen would have likely have hit. Now, his whole theory is that, or according to his sources, again, his sources are his, I don't have sources, I'm just sharing what was shared today, and you can make your own opinion of it. But it's a still shot of John O'Keefe Sr. in John O'Keefe's driveway inspecting the back of Officer John O'Keefe's Traverse on the morning his son was found unalived at Brian Albert's house. Sean says there's a whole video that makes it clear that Mr. O'Keefe was aware that his son's car had visible damage, meaning the taillight damage to Karen Reed's car was from striking Officer John O'Keefe's car. We know from the trial that when the MSP took photos of Officer John O'Keefe's car, the back panel was in perfect condition. Because they were essentially trying to say, oh, like the weight of the snow moved. That's what moved the car, right? Some ridiculous explanation to that. But a lot of people speculate, and I do too, that the damage came, obviously. I mean, it just seems like the most sensible thing, right? We saw you hit his car. You backed in. It's a narrow driveway. It seems like the most reasonable explanation than this convoluted concocta story that the Commonwealth has put together. What happened to the damage from KR backing it into it from the garage? Does Carl Dougal know? So, I mean, I don't know. The ring camera footage was never presented at trial. Was it turned over to Karen Reed's defense team in discovery? Well, apparently, again, and you can go check out Sean's stream. Definitely do. He's entertaining AF. And he's smart. He's a smart guy. I mean, I like Sean. I like Turtle. I don't have any qualms with anybody. I don't. I really don't. I like everybody for different reasons, and I think they all bring something really useful to the table and insight that I am not attuned to. So make that as you will, but I think it just further, if it is true that the car was all fixed up and polished, right, and they were aware of the damage of his car, that stinks. That stinks. Despite Proctor's affidavit declaring he picked up Reed's car at 5:30, and this is huge, and I think if they home in on this Dighton police officer a little bit more in the second, because they didn't even question him, I don't think. They didn't cross-examine him at all. Barrows, I would just home in on this a little bit more, right? And if this video does exist, I mean, why not, right? They're going to call Bill Reed, call John Sr. You know, not that you want to bring the parents into it, but I mean, this is where we're at, right? Call John Sr. Call Carl Dougal. If it's true, I don't know. He took the car at 4:12 p.m., a time to which the Commonwealth conceded a year and a half later. Yeah, that's a huge freaking difference. And you're an officer. You're filling out a police report. Being accurate or as close to accurate is important. And 5:30 and 4:12, especially in the winter, is very different. Like, when does the sun go down, right? I imagine by 5:30 it would start to be getting pretty dark, right? In the winter. In February, absolutely. Very different. Reed thinks this discrepancy was to make it seem as though her car was not in police custody when police pieces of taillight were found. Exactly. After her Lexus was in law enforcement custody, Reed believes her taillight was completely smashed. Or, yeah, it looked like it went through a freaking blender, right? Or somebody took a hammer or something. It wasn't until Proctor greenlit a state emergency response team search after 5:30 p.m. in the dark. Yeah, exactly. This is my thing. 5:30 p.m. It's dark out. So that's what I'm saying is, like, I would also ask Barrows and be like, hey, just curious, right? Just curious. Like, was it dark or light out, right? And even though they conceded on this, just to further iterate, well, like, in the police report, this is what he put. And even though we can see on security camera clear as day that he took the car at this time, just to further home in on this point that he's full of freaking human poop, I don't know. Even for redundancy's sake, right? Just to further drill in the home that these people are full of it. Full of poop. When pieces of the taillight were found in the Albert Yard 1 week later after multiple searches by law enforcement from former police chief Kenny Berkowitz reported spotting more taillight is revealing itself, guys, like Christmas. More taillight in the yard from his moving vehicle and your moving vehicle and their moving vehicle and his moving vehicle during a random drive-by. It's just like, it's so... I don't know how people read this and they're like, yeah, that makes totally, yeah, the snow melted away, right? Like, look at these pictures. That's like near grass, and you're telling me you can't find anything? Look how bright these lights are. I mean, it's so, like, oh my goodness. Reed says that she has always considered the taillight to be the cornerstone of the whole case. It's the only concrete evidence that connects me to the crime scene. Exactly. They don't have the taillight. They don't get more taillight, more cowbell. They don't got Karen Reese going away, getting locked up, right? No conviction for Karen Reed. No evidence was found until they had evidence, right? Exactly. The taillight was not the only discrepancy that came up at trial. The snowplow driver, a witness for Reed's defense, was adamant that he saw no body. No body. He was very steadfast in his responses. When he drove by at 2:45 a.m., his truck has a high vantage point and bright lights. He noted and he constantly scanned his periphery for obstacles. When he passed the house a second time, at about 3:15 a.m., he saw a Ford Edge. The same model car Albert drives parked in front. And I want to go back to Coco because she's the witness of the day. This testimony about the Ford Edge.
Your hand when you walked by.
I don't.
You could play just a little bit more.
Yes.
Is that been a product you find
Lights back.
just a little bit interview, correct?
Yes.
And you listed at least the make and model of about 3 of those vehicles.
Yep.
Do you recall that?
Yep.
You said there's a Cadillac that usually is parked in your driveway, there's a Ford Explorer, and there's a Ford Escape, correct?
Yep.
But you also said there's a 4th car. That's your husband's work vehicle.
Yes. Yep.
What type of car is that?
That's a Ford Edge.
A black Ford Edge.
Yes. Yep.
Is there a reason that you didn't want to state or commit to that in front of this jury when you originally testified?
No, there's no reason. I was just trying to think of all the different cars. We have 5 kids. We've had a lot of different vehicles. I was just saying it as I remembered it.
Like, you wouldn't remember, though, like, in that moment in time. Like, this wasn't like, this is, like, how many cars have you had in your lifetime, Coco? Like, it's not that hard. And 4 cars, I mean, it's not like 10 different cars. And I could see, like, oh, yeah, I forgot. Yeah, and we also have this car, too. I forgot. It's my husband's work vehicle. I don't drive it. He drives it. It's his car, right? It's just, and you could see, like, she does not like Eliza Little asking her about the cars.
News coverage in this case has revealed the importance of a Ford Edge.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
In your mind, a Ford Edge has significance to this case, doesn't it?
Objection, Your Honor.
No, can you answer that? Does a Ford Edge have significance in this case to you?
I've heard it talked about. Yeah.
And what you've heard talked about is that an eyewitness saw.
Objection, Your Honor.
I'm going to stop you on that. The objection sustained.
It's like, for what?
Ms.
For
Albert,
what?
you know there's significance to the Ford Edge, and that's the one
Objection,
thing
Your Honor.
that you did not mention in your initial testimony, correct?
So I'm going to allow that question. Can you answer that?
I just was trying to think of all the different makes and models. I did not purposely say that.
Okay.
She gets so rattled at, like, it's the same reaction she had when they were asking about Colin, too. And it's so funny because it's like, again, Eliza Little is like the last person you should feel like stirred up or crazy by if you have nothing to hide, right? She's got such a calming demeanor, like, to make anybody, even like the question she's asking is brilliantly delivered because it makes you feel comfortable. But if you had nothing to hide, then I would have been like, wow, she's so nice, like, such a lovely lady. Like, it's just it's very telling when you go back. And we're gonna do a rewatch of the whole trial, probably in December, like the 12 days of like the 12 days of Christmas, except it'll be like the 10 weeks of Karen Reed rewatch, something like that. I'll coin it out to be something like that, and we'll do like live streams. It'll be fun. But His truck was at a high vantage point and bright lights. He noted he constantly scanned his periphery for obstacles. Yeah, so the Ford Edge, same model car Albert drives, parked in front. This was unusual, he said, because the Albert family normally does not park on the street. Yes. And it is standard protocol for him to call in a vehicle on the side of the road. During cross-examination, the prosecution presented a different timeline, calling into question the driver's account. And this actually played a role into part of why I guess the jury didn't find Lucky to be credible, is because of his comments about the basketball hoop and hitting that accidentally and not reporting it or something to that effect. And they were like, oh, well, I guess him not reporting the Alberts home as a courtesy because he knew them for decades and he knew that, like, you don't mess with royalty, right? You're gonna get a frickin' swirly because these people are frickin' high schoolers. They're frickin' teenagers who've peaked in high school and have never gotten a grip on reality and have never had to smell their own poop until now. Until now. And I'm so excited to see the crumbling of this Albert McCabe empire and for Karen Reed to get justice and for, most importantly, Officer John O'Keefe to get justice. And that was the end of the first part of the Vanity Fair article. As you can see, we are coming up at a cool 3 hours in this unedited version. So I'm going to cut it here. We will do part 2 tomorrow or later today if I'm feeling frisky. So we'll see how quickly I can get a move on things. But yeah, hopefully, if I don't screw this one up, things should be out on time, and you can enjoy hanging out with me and talking all things Karen Reed. And with that being said, if you enjoyed today's content, enjoyed today's readout, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe button, make sure you hit that notification bell so you don't miss part 2 from me, and make sure you hit that like button because that tells the interwebs and the YouTube algorithm and the gods and all of that this is newsworthy news, and it is. And these bombshells that are going to drip, droppity, drop tomorrow, these meatballs that are going to be descending like locusts from the skies, I can't wait. I cannot wait because this is only the beginning. Apparently, there's talks of more better old bombshells, so I will be on the alert and look out for that. But we got tons coming down the pike, not only with this case, but with other cases. I'm getting it together, guys. I'm trying. It's hard being a one-woman show, so if anybody wants to offer any assistance on a volunteer basis, I'm all ears. I could use the helping hand, but with that being said, stay amazing, stay kind. I appreciate the duck out of each and every one of you for showing up and putting up with my inconsistencies, and I will see you in the next one.